Thanks so much for joining us. We are the Massie twins from GoneWithTheTwins.com, and today we'll be doing a movie review on Toy Story 4, which we just got finished seeing. But before we even went to the screening, the first thing that ran through my head was, is this necessary? I kind of likened it. The original trilogy was such a it ended nicely. It was a very round, nice complete conclusion. Sort of a thing. And I feel like you get in danger of running into like Ice Age or Shrek, where there's so many entries that eventually it starts to falter and they're just not.
Well, I feel like in general Pixar does better when they start new entities and start fresh.
Yes, and I think going on in years from now, they're going to continue to do that.
Although Toy Story, to be fair, was probably one of their most popular franchises.
Yes, and you know what? I was very pleased with this. And as I mentioned to you on the way out of there, if they continue to be this good, then keep them coming. It's interesting. I think Pixar, more than any other studio, is just so in tune with storytelling. They're focusing so much on storytelling over every other aspect, and it shows. It absolutely pays off. I found this to be very, very entertaining. Anyway, so for people who've seen the trailers, roughly there's a little. What is it, like 9 years earlier? Yeah. It starts just to kind of fill us in on the fact that Bo Peep gets separated from Woody and the gang.
Yeah. Well, at the very beginning of the movie, Woody has to make the tough choice to stay with Bonnie and
his new kid after
Andy. His new kid, and make basically the choice is: do I stay with the child and fulfill my duty, to be the toy for this kid, or do I go off with Bo Peep, who is strangely kind of like a love interest?
Yeah,
it's a theme that doesn't necessarily translate too well with toys, but I mean they make it work because they basically turned these toys into, they might as well be humans.
Yeah, and so here, when they catch up to the present day, Bonnie is, her big fear is going to kindergarten, first day of school, and so Woody sneaks in a backpack and kind of goes to that. But along for this ride, Bonnie ends up creating a new character called Forky for the orientation. They do like an arts and crafts thing, and out of a spork
designs her own toy.
Yeah, out of a spork and then a broken popsicle stick and those kind of things, she designs Forky. And what's really interesting about this character, so it's voiced by Tony Hale, could not be more perfect. He's instantly recognizable, but it's such a fantastic bit of voice work. It is so comical, this character.
Well, the whole film, I mean, they really effectively use humor. Yeah. And I think Forky is probably the funniest part of the movie, but also it's kind of a darker, weirder sort of humor.
Yeah, I think in Toy Story 3, you got with Barbie and Ken, you got kind of this more mature, sort of an adult type of humor mixed into. So even though on the outside it's all toys, there's a certain level of maturity here that plays really well to adults, while the kids can focus on the other things.
The thing about Pixar films is they're kind of disguised almost as a kids movie, but they really
there's something for everybody.
It's really adults and kids can enjoy it.
And here Forky, I think, takes that role because right from the start, he needs to be coached on what it is to be a toy because he believes that he's trash, and he is. And it gets into this weird but also very, very wry bit of I hate to use the word existentialism, but there's sort of this thing about what it takes to become sentient and how to kind of behave with that newfound knowledge of life. It's very fascinating, almost deep to a degree,
and also comically very dark because he's almost suicidal in a way.
Yeah, they've mixed some very mature themes in here that, again, kids won't even notice, which is great, but the adults can kind of dwell on this a little bit and get
I felt like there was a lot of little subtle jokes here and there that are going to play better for adults, and kids aren't even going to.
Yes, and another thing that we had mentioned before was we were talking about this on the way out of the theater. So there's a villain in this one. Yeah. The new villain is a Gabby doll,
voiced by Christina Hendricks.
Yes, that's right, and strange because she's not a recognizable voice, but anyway, so this character, she's the villain, but in the same way that Forky has this weird sort of combination of both heroism as well as grappling with his identity. Gabby is not a straightforward villain. When we're first introduced to her, she's got these ventriloquist dummy henchmen, which is just nightmare-inducing.
Chilling.
And very, very inexplicably, this movie has a lot of jump scares in it. Now, again, because the whole movie is a kid's movie, they're not ones that you get really invested into, but there's a lot of boo moments that in any other film, coincidentally, there's an Annabelle film right around the corner. In any other film, this would be absolutely horrifying. But anyway, the ventriloquist dummies are her bodyguards, and she seems like the kind of character. I almost liken it to Walking Dead. You know, we're at this point in the Toy Story universe where every time you're introduced to a new toy, you never know, is this a good guy? Is this a bad guy? There's something a little off about every one of these characters. But anyway, so you know, she's from the beginning, you know, there's something wrong with her. But it's again, what Pixar does so well with this is it's complex. It's so complex.
She's not a straightforward villain. She has motives and, you know, reasons behind what she's doing. And to her, she doesn't believe she's a villain. She thinks she's doing this for a higher cause and things.
Yes. And in the really same way that we have this intricacy with Woody and Bo Peep as kind of a romance, you've also got this very complex relationship with the heroes and the villains. And this villain in particular, she's dynamic. She's unpredictable. She does some outright villainous things and some very kind of creepy, scary things, but also there's room for redemption and very interesting interactions that they get to play out. And Woody, being you know, a more well-rounded hero, isn't so interested in simply vanquishing this villain. This is not a monster or an obstacle. And this is an opportunity for reform.
And they even create sympathy with the character. It's a very well-rounded character.
It's surprising how much emotion is in a movie with toys. You know, there's, you know, and I've said this many times, Pixar, they put to shame with their attention to storytelling. They're kind of putting to shame all of these other movies, these big blockbuster movies that are so focused on special effects and so focused on, you know, spectacle. Here, we're back to stripping it down to how to tell a good story first, how to develop interesting characters. And again, these characters are so well done that they're more human than anything else that we've seen in a lot of these other big blockbuster type movies.
Yeah, well, especially I think with you know, animated films and computer animated films, you have to really plan everything out perfectly because you know, there's so much time and effort taken into, you know, animating and you know, doing the rigging and skinning and all of that stuff involved in bringing these characters to life, that story has to be solid. Otherwise the audience is going to be able to tell. They'll feel the lulls even more.
I think a lot of people fantasize about the idea that maybe there's a lot of improvisation, and here we have Key and Peele playing supporting characters, and you'd think with their comic background that there would be improvisation. I don't think there's a lot of that going on. I think Pixar knows exactly what the story they want to tell. They know exactly where they want to put the jokes, where they want to put the, you know, the emotion, and where the pathos, and where they want to put the, you know, the comic relief. And I think the meticulous planning, it pays off. And so sadly there probably is no improvisation going on. This is a very well-oiled machine. Everything sort of kind of plays out exactly how
I think everybody already knows, you know, very well Woody and Buzz, and so they're, you know, they get a decent amount of the pathos and the humor and everything. But for me, the supporting characters, the new characters they introduced, are really probably the highlight of the film. Forky is you know, hysterical in all the scenes. It's like a very bizarre, weird humor, but it works. And then of course Ducky and Bunny are Key and Peele, and they get some really good lines, and they're interesting, you know, supporting characters.
Actually, in a sort of sad way, but I feel like Buzz Lightyear, even though he is a major character, he's kind of been
he's
tossed aside a little bit. He gets some funny lines here and there, but this is not his story. This is very much Woody. And
if anything, it's Bo Peep gets second billing almost, as far as her, you know, the journey that her character takes, right? The character arc itself.
Yeah, so. And in a large way, this is Gabby's story as well, because, you know, deep down there's a desire for her to gain a human. You know, the idea of having a child is a very covetous sort of a thing, and her journey is not simply to destroy Woody and Bo Peep, or to, you know, again, it's a very interesting, multi-layered villain that is not just out to be evil. And again, there's redemption. There's a possibility for redemption here, and so her ultimate goal is, you know, she has a broken voice box, but anyway, the ultimate goal here is to gain some of the things that Woody has had in his life, the opportunity to be loved and to be played with and things. This is a kind of a lost toy.
Yeah, well, some of the themes they bring into this are, you know, the sense of duty. It kind of maybe delves a little bit deeper into why these toys are the way they are, and what their purpose is.
Yes, and you know, you had mentioned Sausage Party, which is something you'd think could not be in any way comparable to a Pixar film, but in a strange way, the way in which Sausage Party had behind the scenes, they had societies, and this Toy Story 4 also has, you know, and we saw a little bit of it in Toy Story 3 in the way that who was it, the Lots of Love Bear kind of had his own society. here we get, so it's almost like an underground toy world, and there's it's like the lost toys.
There's so much more of what goes on when the humans aren't looking.
Right, the scope has gotten a little bit bigger, so now
and in fact, there's a lot of this, it's not so much that when the humans aren't looking, but how do you still slip by when their humans are all over the place? And there's a moment where they're in a carnival and there's humans all over the place, but they still have to weave in and out of the crowd or jump over things. And
it's fascinating,
interesting,
the ways in which they target or kind of analyze and explain, becoming sentient for Forky, the rules that they follow, yet. So the villainous toys and the hero toys kind of follow the same sets of rules of toys, and who dictates this, and the way it ends too. They also kind of tie it all together. Again, the scope has gotten larger, so we're starting to examine more of the world, qualities of freedom, and what it means not to have an owner. So even though the perfect paradise of a toy is to have an Andy or to have a Bonnie to be loved and played with, there's also the idea of, well, what happens when your toy is damaged, or what happens when your toy is discarded. Yes, and then what's the lifespan of a toy, and these kind of things. It's quite complex. And again, the beautiful thing about this is kids are not going to care about any of that. They're going to be there's so much humor, there's so much color, there's action and excitement, so that'll all occupy the kids, and then the adults can kind of really embrace the fact that there's so much complex, just fascinating material in here that is well beyond the means of almost any movie we've seen recently in the theater. There's just great stuff going on in here, and I mentioned the action briefly. Some of the action scenes in here are so much better. We'd just seen Men in Black and Shaft and some genuine action movies with all of the special effects and the the explosions and car chases and stuff. They do absolutely spectacular choreography in action scenes in this, and with such a great level of emotion and feelings for these characters, it's more realistic than you could. There's more of an emotional connection than with.
But they also wisely,
of other films.
It's a formula. But every time there's a moment of like pathos, or you maybe they're about to get you a tear or something, then they follow it up with a heavy dose of humor or something.
Yeah, no, the humor I think is absolutely one of the strong points too. But for me, very well-rounded film, and we won't give a score in this video, but if you go to gonewiththetwins.com, you'll be able to see hopefully our written review, and then we'll attach a score to that. But I think that sums it up for this. Very impressive, and we'll be back with another movie review real soon.
And if we're not, just wait longer.